What if I told you the greatest secret ever guarded by ancient initiates and secret societies was never really hidden at all? It was simply overlooked by almost everyone who wasn't ready to see it. You've heard the stories. You've seen the symbols, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, the checkerboard floors, the compass and square, Freemasonry, illuminated knowledge, occult wisdom whispered through centuries in hushed voices and candlelit chambers. But here's the truth most won't tell you. The real mystery isn't locked away in temples or encrypted in ancient scrolls. The real mystery, the one that unlocks godlike power, has always been hiding in plain sight. It's not in some distant vault or sacred text. It's right here, buried within the chambers of your own mind. You were never meant to simply observe life. You were meant to shape it, mold it, command it, but the world you were born into never told you that. Instead, you were conditioned to look outward for power, for answers, for validation. From your earliest memories, you were trained to believe that authority lives outside of you, in governments, in systems, in hierarchies. No one ever told you that the most powerful system on earth is your own consciousness. And that's not accidental. The architects of reality, the ones who understood how creation truly works, knew that if the masses ever discovered this truth, everything would change. The game would be over. So instead of hiding it entirely, they disguised it. They wrapped sacred principles in symbolism, buried spiritual laws beneath layers of allegory, and guarded the true teachings behind degrees, rituals, and titles. Not because they were evil, but because they understood something you're about to understand too. Power in the wrong hands is chaos. The uninitiated are not evil, but they are dangerous, because they act without wisdom. And so, the knowledge was veiled, not erased. And yet, here you are, listening to these words not by accident, but by resonance. Something in you has always known that there's more. That reality isn't as random or limited as they told you. That you are more than flesh and bone, more than a name, a job, or a personality. You felt it in moments when the veil grew thin, when time slowed down, and you saw through the cracks of this illusion. You felt it when synchronicity danced through your day like a divine fingerprint. You've sensed it when you looked up at the stars and remembered, without knowing why, that you came here for a reason. That reason is awakening. But not in the way trendy slogans suggest. This isn't about feeling good, it's about seeing clearly. Because once you see the truth of who you really are, and what this life really is, the illusion collapses. You stop being a victim of life and become its architect. And that is exactly what the ancient initiates were after. Not domination of others, but mastery of self. You've likely heard of the 33rd degree in Freemasonry. To the outside world, it's seen as an honorary title, a symbol of accomplishment within an old fraternity. But within spiritual circles, it holds a much deeper resonance. It's not about status, it's about symbolism. The number 33 represents ascension, the fusion of physical experience and divine intelligence. In the human body, your spine contains 33 vertebrae, and it is said that when spiritual energy, what some traditions call kundalini, rises from the base of the spine to the crown of the head, the initiate is reborn, not metaphorically, but consciously. You transcend the illusion of separation and begin to operate from a higher octave of reality. This is not mysticism for the sake of mystery. This is neuro-spiritual alchemy, and it begins with one realization: nothing outside of you has power unless you give it permission. Every emotion you feel, every circumstance you experience, every coincidence you encounter, stems from one place: your state of consciousness. The ancient Hermeticists said it simply: as within, so without, as above, so below. This is not poetic. It is mechanical, lawful, immutable. What's wild is how obvious it is once you start seeing it. Look around. The people who dwell in fear seem to always attract more things to fear. The ones who obsess over betrayal tend to be betrayed. The ones who expect failure tend to stumble no matter how hard they try. But flip that. Those who expect abundance, deeply, vibrationally, somehow always land on their feet. Those who radiate love without condition often find themselves surrounded by it. Those who dare to believe they are powerful become powerful. And this isn't luck, it's causality. Internal state precedes external result. But here's the twist most people miss. The process of awakening isn't about adding more knowledge to your mind. It's about unlearning, peeling away the programming, the conditioning, the noise that has drowned out your original signal. You don't become powerful. You remember that you already were. You don't ascend to godlike states. You return to the awareness that you've always been divine. So why don't more people see it? Why does this truth, which is so close, feel so far away? It's because we've been trained to only trust what we can touch. But what's real isn't always tangible. Thought isn't visible, but it builds empires. Emotion isn't solid, but it shapes entire lives. And belief, though silent, is the architect of your entire reality. You live in a society built to keep you focused outward. They give you screens to stare into, systems to obey, identities to cling to, and fears to chase. But none of it is real power. Real power is the stillness beneath the storm. It's the awareness behind the thought. It's the space in you that never changes, even when your world does. That space is the true temple. And once you begin to live from that place, consciously, intentionally, something incredible happens. You start to see the patterns. You begin noticing the loops in your life that aren't random. You realize that your relationships, your finances, your health, they're not accidents. They are reflections. Mirrors of belief systems you didn't even know you were carrying. And once you identify the root, once you trace the outer effect to its inner cause, you gain leverage. That's when you stop reacting and start creating. This is what the initiates knew. This is why the higher degrees of ancient orders weren't about authority. They were about responsibility. The 33rd degree represents not just knowledge, but embodiment. It is the point at which the initiate becomes the cause, not the effect. Where life no longer happens to you, it happens through you. And once that switch flips, nothing is ever the same again. This truth has always been here, hidden not in darkness, but in plain sight. And if you're hearing this now, it's because you're ready to remember. The temple is not out there. The key is not in someone else's hand. The sacred flame you seek has always been burning, in the quiet center of your own being. Now, the only question that remains is, will you dare to enter? What if I told you the number 33 isn't just a number, it's a signal, one sent through time by ancient minds who understood a truth so potent they could only express it through symbols. You've probably heard of the 33rd degree as something mysterious, a final level reached only by a chosen few, a pinnacle of achievement in Freemasonry, shrouded in secrecy and speculation. But what if the 33rd degree was never about status? What if it's not about an external organization at all, but a hidden blueprint embedded in your very existence, a roadmap leading to something far more sacred than recognition? Once you understand what this symbol really means, you'll begin to see it everywhere. In your body, your story, your evolution. Because the 33rd degree is not a number you receive, it's a state you embody. Let's start with the physical, the architecture of your body. Your spine has 33 vertebrae. That's not an accident. In every ancient tradition, the spine is considered sacred. It's the axis, the ladder, the bridge between earth and heaven. In yogic traditions, it's where the Kundalini energy coils, a dormant force waiting to rise. In mystical Christianity, the spine represents the stairway to heaven. In Kabbalistic thought, it echoes the tree of life itself. The path to divinity doesn't begin in some distant realm. It begins at the base of your own spine. And when you begin to ascend, internally, energetically, you are retracing a divine journey mapped directly into your biology. But it doesn't stop there. The number 33 has echoed throughout history with unsettling consistency. Jesus is said to have performed 33 miracles, lived 33 years. There are 33 degrees in Scottish Rite Freemasonry: the human spine, the degrees of light, the age of sacrifice. These aren't coincidences, they're clues. They're whispers of a deeper code that governs transformation. Not superficial change, but alchemical, radical, inner rebirth. In the ancient schools of initiation, numbers were never just numbers. They were frequencies, gateways. Every number carried a vibration, and those vibrations held spiritual consequences. The number 3, for example, represents the Trinity, body, mind, and spirit. Creation, preservation, and transformation. When repeated as 33, that frequency is magnified. The double 3 becomes a master number, a threshold you cannot cross without leaving behind everything false, everything shallow, everything that isn't aligned with the divine. This is why the 33rd degree was never meant to be for everyone, not because it's elitist, but because it requires surrender. You cannot fake alignment. You cannot cheat consciousness. The ones who reach the 33rd degree symbolically are those who have transcended ego's grip, not perfectly, but powerfully. They've faced their own darkness, not with judgment, but with courage. They've turned inward instead of chasing outward validation, and through that internal revolution, they've earned access, not to control others, but to master themselves. The world you live in rewards appearance, but the symbolic path of the 33rd degree demands authenticity. That's why it's often misunderstood. The external mind sees it as a ranking, a badge of honor, but the inner eye knows better. It sees that the degree isn't a destination, it's a frequency. A vibration you rise into by refining your inner world until it can no longer support falsehood. And once that shift occurs, your external world bends to match. You may be wondering, if this symbol is so powerful, why don't more people know its true meaning? The answer is simple. Truth reveals itself only to those who are willing to see it. And most of the world is too distracted, too entangled in illusions, too busy arguing about symbols instead of listening to what they're trying to say. The 33rd degree isn't for the clever. It's for the clear. It's for the soul who is ready to strip away layers of ego, fear, and control, and to return to the stillness that existed before identity took hold. When you look at the rituals of ancient orders, you'll find something fascinating. They weren't about worshipping gods, they were about becoming conscious of the God within. Initiation was always an inner process, coded through outer ceremonies, yes, but pointing to something internal. The darkness of the chamber, the blindfold over the eyes, the passage through symbolic death, these were metaphors. Metaphors for what happens when the ego dissolves and the higher mind awakens. And this is the heart of the 33rd degree. It's not a final achievement, it's the beginning of true mastery. It's the moment you stop looking for power and start becoming the cause of your reality. It's the shift from external manipulation to internal alignment. You stop seeking secrets and start becoming the answer. You stop begging the universe for permission and begin vibrating in harmony with its laws. In this state, your thoughts are not just idle mental activity, they are living architecture. Your emotions are not fleeting moods, they are electromagnetic signatures that shape the field around you. You become conscious of what you once did unconsciously. You begin to speak less and manifest more. Why? Because your vibration no longer conflicts with your intention. Your inner state has become coherent, and coherence is power. Imagine walking into a room, saying nothing, and yet shifting the entire atmosphere. Imagine choosing silence, not out of fear, but because your energy speaks louder than words. Imagine radiating such authenticity that lies and illusions simply cannot cling to you. That is the symbolic essence of the 33rd degree. It is not an external identity. It is a frequency that reveals itself through presence. And presence, unlike pretense, cannot be faked. But here's the part they never tell you. You don't have to be a Mason to access this frequency. You don't need robes or rituals or titles. You need alignment. You need honesty with yourself. You need to understand that the path to power is not a ladder you climb, it's a depth you descend into. The deeper you go into self-awareness, the higher you rise in consciousness. And when those two axes meet, when vertical depth meets horizontal presence, you become the temple. The compass and square are no longer just symbols, they are etched into your being. This is what changes everything. Because once you understand the 33rd degree symbolically, you realize something shocking. Everyone is invited, but only a few choose to walk the path. Not because the door is locked, but because the path demands a kind of courage that can't be taught. The courage to look within, to face the mirror without flinching, to stop blaming the world and start recalibrating your vibration. This is sacred work, and most of the world is too distracted, too numb, too externally obsessed to do it. But you're not most of the world. If you're still here, it's because something in you is ready to remember. The 33rd degree isn't a mystery to be solved, it's a frequency to be embodied. And every step you take toward inner coherence, every thought you purify, every wound you transmute, every shadow you integrate, moves you closer to that state, not as a title, but as a living truth. You don't earn it with effort. You align with it through transformation. And when you do, the symbols no longer confuse you. They speak. The numbers no longer intimidate you. They guide. The ancient teachings no longer feel distant. They echo from your own soul. Because now, you're no longer standing outside the temple. You've become the light within it. What if I told you that the God you've been searching for, through books, beliefs, doctrines, or distant heavens, has always been waiting for you inside yourself? This journey isn't about joining a group, reciting the right affirmations, or collecting sacred objects. It's not about symbols painted on the walls of secret chambers. It's about decoding the symbol etched into your soul. Because no matter what you've been taught, you were never powerless. You were never separate. You've just forgotten. And now, you are beginning to remember. Inside of you, there is a spark, a living, breathing current of divine fire, buried not because it's lost, but because you've been trained not to look. This spark is not a metaphor. It is real. It is the seed of consciousness placed within you by something greater than your name, your story, or your past. This is the core of your being, the godlike essence, the silent observer that's been with you through every trial, every failure, every moment of stillness that made time stop. The part of you that never ages, never panics, never lies. Most people live their entire lives disconnected from this inner flame. Not because they lack it, but because they are drowning in noise, conditioned by the world to seek outside approval, trained to measure their worth by achievement, appearance, or applause. The moment you were born, society began covering your spark with layers of distraction. Schooling taught you what to think, not how to think. Media told you what beauty looks like. Religion told you what God looks like. Culture told you what success means. But nobody ever handed you a mirror and said, "Look, there, right there, behind the eyes, that's where God begins." You see, the inner spark doesn't scream for attention. It waits, patiently, silently. And only when you become still enough, when you begin to turn inward instead of outward, do you start to feel it again. It shows up in the moments you can't explain, when your intuition speaks louder than logic, when you know something before it happens, when you feel connected to a stranger with no words exchanged. Those are flickers of the spark, trying to pierce through the mental fog. The great paradox is this: the more you chase power outside of you, the more you disconnect from the only power that's real. True divinity does not arrive through conquest or command. It emerges through alignment. You don't awaken the spark by trying to become godlike. You awaken it by remembering you already are. This remembering isn't arrogant, it's sacred, because the spark doesn't make you above others. It reveals that you're connected to all. The ancients knew this. They didn't just teach about gods in the sky. They pointed to the divinity within man. The temples they built weren't just physical, they were symbolic blueprints for the soul. Every pillar, every chamber, every staircase upward represented an inward journey toward awakening the inner flame, and they guarded these teachings fiercely, not out of greed, but out of reverence. Because once you ignite that flame, you become responsible for what you create with it. And here's what most people never understand. The flame doesn't explode into being. It grows with every conscious decision you make. Every time you choose love over fear, the flame expands. Every time you pause before reacting in anger, it brightens. Every time you speak your truth, especially when it's uncomfortable, it rises. And with each act of alignment, you begin to feel what the initiates called the divine current. It's not mystical, it's magnetic. It shifts how you walk, how you speak, how you feel. People begin to sense something in you. Not ego, not force, just light. But awakening the spark requires more than insight. It demands purification. You must be willing to let go of what you've outgrown. You must release the beliefs that keep you small, the trauma that keeps you reactive, the identity that keeps you repeating the same emotional loops. The fire cannot burn where the heart is cluttered. And so, your life becomes a sacred firewalk, burning away all that is false, until only what is true remains. This is why initiation is never glamorous. It is not a celebration, it is a shedding, a grieving of who you thought you were, a disillusionment with everything you once clung to. It is the crumbling of illusions, relationships that no longer match your frequency, ambitions that no longer light you up, habits that numb rather than heal, and in the rubble, the spark begins to glow. At first, it flickers. Some days you feel divine, and others you forget again. That's okay. Awakening is not a straight line, it's a spiral. Every return to the flame makes you stronger, and each time you come back with less attachment, less judgment, more clarity, until one day, you stop asking for signs. You stop waiting for permission, you simply become the light you were looking for. You begin to notice something remarkable. Your thoughts no longer chase chaos. Your emotions no longer hijack your peace. You stop reacting to the world and start responding from something deeper. People sense it. They ask what changed, but it's not something you can explain. How do you describe a fire that has no smoke, a presence that cannot be measured? All you can do is live it. This is the path of the awakened. Not special, not chosen, just willing to remember the truth when it's easier to forget. Willing to believe in your divinity when the world profits from your insecurity. Willing to choose alignment over approval. That willingness is everything. It is what the ancient mystery schools sought to cultivate. Not blind followers, but conscious creators. And here's what no one tells you. Once you awaken the spark, your life no longer belongs to you alone. Your presence becomes medicine for others. Your voice carries frequency. Your energy becomes a tuning fork. And without effort, without force, you begin to shift others. Not by preaching, but by being. Your light calls their light forward. And in doing so, you fulfill your real purpose. To remember, and to remind, there is no savior coming to rescue you. There is no chosen one destined to fix the world. There is only you. You, with a spark inside you, that has waited lifetimes to be awakened. And now, in this very moment, the choice is yours. You can return to sleep, or you can breathe in, feel the heat rise within you, and let the fire burn. Let it burn away the lies. Let it burn away the fear. Let it burn until all that remains is truth, pulsing through every cell of your being like a silent roar. You don't need to look for miracles. You are one. The spark is not out there. It is here, always was, always will be. The question is not whether it exists. The question is, are you ready to ignite it? What if I told you that every single moment of your life is unfolding not by chance, but by law, an invisible law that doesn't just govern the universe, but governs your every thought, every emotion, every outcome? You've heard the phrase, cause and effect. Maybe you've used it to explain why something happened, why you got the job, or why the relationship ended, why you felt lucky, or why everything seemed to fall apart. But what if your understanding of this law was only surface level? What if the real power behind it was hidden not in the obvious, but in the subtle, not in the seen, but in the felt, not in the world of matter, but in the world of mind? Most people treat cause and effect like a physical law. You push something, it moves. You touch fire, you get burned. Simple, mechanical, external. But that's just the most basic expression of it. The real law doesn't begin in the physical world, it begins in consciousness. What appears around you, your environment, your circumstances, your relationships, isn't the origin of anything, it's the mirror, the afterimage. The echo of something that started in the invisible realms long before it ever became something you could see or touch. Your life right now is not a random arrangement of unrelated events, it's a tapestry of effects woven by causes that you, knowingly or not, set into motion through your dominant thoughts, persistent feelings, and unconscious beliefs. This may be a hard truth to swallow, especially when life hasn't been kind. But once you understand it, you no longer have to live at the mercy of circumstances. You become the architect of them. The ancient initiates understood this. They knew that energy follows intention, and that every thought is a seed. Not just a poetic idea, a literal mechanism. You plant a thought, and if you feed it with emotion, especially repetition, that seed grows roots. And eventually, it bears fruit. You may not remember planting it. You may not like the fruit. But the law doesn't care about memory or preference. It only cares about vibration. And vibration doesn't lie. Here's what most people don't realize. Thought is not neutral. Thought is causative. Every time you think, you are broadcasting frequency. Every time you feel, you are adding momentum to that broadcast. Whether you know it or not, your inner world is always transmitting a signal, and the universe, like a faithful mirror, reflects back to you the precise frequency you emit. This means that complaining doesn't just express dissatisfaction, it multiplies it. Worry doesn't just indicate fear, it calls in more reasons to be afraid. On the flip side, gratitude doesn't just feel good, it amplifies abundance. Joy doesn't just uplift you, it attracts more things to be joyful about. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are in vibrational harmony with. The universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your essence. Think about your own life. Look at any area, your health, your finances, your relationships. Ask yourself honestly, what patterns keep showing up? What cycles repeat, no matter how hard you try to break them? These are not accidents, these are effects. And if you trace them inward, you'll find causes, often subtle, often buried, but always alive. A belief that says you're not good enough, a fear of rejection that pushes love away, a quiet resentment that poisons your peace. You don't need to judge yourself for these things, but you do need to see them, because until you do, you'll keep mistaking the mirror for the source. This is why transformation doesn't happen through external force, it happens through internal realignment. Most people try to change the effect without changing the cause. They switch jobs, end relationships, move cities, but bring the same vibration with them, so the same story repeats, different scenery, same energy, because the law isn't fooled by action, it listens to frequency, and frequency comes from within. Once you understand this, you stop wasting energy trying to manipulate the world. Instead, you learn to command the invisible. You stop asking, how can I fix this out there? And start asking, what belief is generating this? What emotion is sustaining it? What thought do I keep entertaining that gives life to this outcome? That shift, from external fixing to internal creating, is the difference between being a victim of cause and a master of it. The power of this law is not limited to your personal life. It applies to everything. Collective consciousness is nothing more than the aggregation of individual causes. Wars don't start in boardrooms. They start in unresolved rage. Economic collapse doesn't begin in markets. It begins in scarcity consciousness. Societal healing doesn't emerge from policy. It emerges from a shift in collective frequency. The outer world always follows the inner world. Always. But knowing this is not enough. You must live it. You must take radical responsibility for your inner state, not in a self-critical way, but in a liberating one. Because once you realize you're the cause, you also realize you're the cure. You can begin to choose your thoughts with care. You can begin to hold emotions like sacred fire, knowing they're shaping your field. You can begin to say no to frequencies that don't serve you, not because you're avoiding life, but because you're cultivating a higher one. The law doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't punish mistakes. It simply reflects. And that's what makes it so powerful. You're not waiting on karma or divine intervention or cosmic timing. You're engaging with a principle that's as immediate and responsive as your own breath. What you put in, you get out. Not just once, but over and over, until you make a different choice. Imagine what would change if you woke up tomorrow fully conscious of this law. You'd guard your thoughts like precious gold. You'd become aware of your emotional state not just as a reaction, but as a signal. You'd stop trying to force outcomes, and instead tune yourself to the frequency of the result you desire. And in doing so, you'd begin to bend reality, not through manipulation, but through resonance. This is what it means to walk the path of the initiate. Not to worship the universe, but to co-create with it. Not to beg for miracles, but to embody the frequency that makes them inevitable. The real law of cause and effect doesn't ask for belief. It operates regardless. But when you begin to live in harmony with it, something shifts. Life becomes less random, less chaotic, less resistant. You begin to feel that subtle sense of flow. Synchronicities increase, doors open, things click. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped fighting its laws and started dancing with them. You are not a puppet. You are not a pawn. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a living transmitter of reality, wired with divine intelligence, coded with infinite potential. The only thing that determines your experience is the frequency you hold. And that frequency is a direct result of the thoughts you think, the emotions you entertain, and the beliefs you embody. So if you want to change your life, don't start with the effect. Start with the cause. Go inward, clear the static, elevate your signal, choose a new thought and water it daily. Choose a higher emotion and anchor it deeply. Choose to live as if the world responds to you, because it does. This isn't magic, this is law. Not imposed from the outside, but written into the fabric of your being. The question is not whether it works, the question is whether you're ready to work with it. And if you are, then everything begins to change. What if I told you your mind isn't just a place where thoughts appear? It's a transmitter, constantly sending out energetic instructions to the universe, whether you're aware of it or not. Every thought you think, no matter how fleeting or unconscious, is a spark of electrical energy. That spark carries a frequency. And that frequency doesn't just stay inside your head, it moves outward. It echoes. It touches the fabric of reality itself. This is not metaphor. This is spiritual physics. Your consciousness is not confined to your body. It projects, it radiates, it instructs. And what you experience in your external world is simply a reflection of what you've been transmitting from within. Thought is not random mental chatter. It is sacred technology, ancient, potent, divine. Most people move through life unaware that their minds are shaping their reality in real time. They believe they are thinking about the world, when in truth, they are building it. They think their thoughts are private, contained, safe from consequence. But they're not. Every repeated thought becomes a thread in the fabric of your vibration. And your vibration determines your outcomes, your relationships, your health, your synchronicities. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you broadcast. This is why the ancients placed so much emphasis on the purification of thought, not for moral reasons, but for vibrational reasons. They understood that the mind was a creative force, and like any technology, it could be used constructively or destructively. A focused thought, imbued with feeling, was more powerful than armies. A negative thought, allowed to repeat unchecked, could poison timelines. That's how precise this sacred mechanism is. And this is what you were never taught. You see, no one ever handed you a manual for your mind. No one taught you how to direct thought with intention. Instead, your thoughts were shaped by your environment, your upbringing, your fears. Over time, you started to believe that you were your thoughts. You identified with them. You let them run unchecked. And in doing so, you unknowingly became a passive creator, someone who reacts to reality instead of shaping it. But here's what changes everything. The moment you realize thought is sacred, you begin to treat it differently. You become the observer, not the slave. You notice what you're thinking, not with judgment, but with reverence. You begin to ask, is this thought feeding my future, or starving it? You start to choose thoughts the way you would choose ingredients for a sacred meal, intentionally, carefully, with love. Thought is the blueprint. Emotion is the energy. Together, they create. When a thought arises and it is fed with a strong emotional charge, whether positive or negative, it gains momentum. It becomes magnetic. It starts pulling in experiences, people, and situations that match its frequency. This is how reality is built, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Think about the most persistent themes in your life. Are you always struggling with money? Always attracting the same kind of toxic relationships? Always feeling unseen or undervalued? These are not coincidences. They are the manifestations of thought patterns that have become embedded in your field. And the only way to change the pattern is to change the signal. This is where discipline becomes sacred, not in the old sense of punishment or deprivation, but in the higher sense of alignment. Spiritual discipline means choosing thoughts that support your highest self, even when the world tempts you to spiral. It means holding your vision when your senses scream otherwise. It means understanding that your mind is a divine tool, and like any tool, it must be sharpened, cleaned, and wielded with care. And this doesn't mean you never have a negative thought. You're human. You'll get angry. You'll feel fear. You'll doubt. But the difference is, now you catch it. You don't feed it. You don't give it room to build a nest in your mind. You let it rise and fall like a wave. You bless it, learn from it, and choose again. That's the practice. That's the mastery. There's a reason so many ancient schools focused on silence, stillness, and inner observation. They weren't trying to escape thought. They were trying to understand its power. They knew that the outer world is a lagging indicator of the inner world. Change your thoughts today, and your life changes tomorrow. Not always instantly, but always inevitably. The delay is not failure, it's incubation. It's the time required for the new vibration to solidify into form. This is why affirmations, visualizations, and mental rehearsal work. Not because they're magic spells, but because they reprogram your broadcast. They shift the signal you send to the field. They install a new blueprint, and once the new blueprint is dominant, the old reality has no choice but to dissolve. That's how reality bends. But thought alone is not enough. It must be infused with feeling. The universe responds to coherence, not empty words. You can say, "I am abundant" all day long, but if underneath that mantra you are vibrating scarcity, the universe responds to the vibration, not the words. This is where inner alignment becomes essential. You must feel what you're thinking. You must believe what you're broadcasting. And that belief doesn't come from forcing. It comes from repetition, trust, and embodiment. So how do you begin to master this technology? You start by becoming aware. Awareness is the first sacred act. Begin to notice your recurring thoughts, especially the ones that arise in quiet moments, when you're walking, driving, lying in bed. Ask yourself, what am I broadcasting right now? Is this thought aligned with the future I want to create, or is it reinforcing a reality I want to escape? Then, begin to choose differently, not all at once, not with pressure, but one thought at a time. If you notice a thought of fear, pause, replace it with a thought of trust. If you notice a thought of limitation, replace it with a thought of expansion. Do this gently, but consistently. Over time, you'll notice something miraculous. Your inner world will become more spacious. Your emotions will stabilize. Your reality will begin to reflect a new level of clarity. The mind is a sacred engine. It can build worlds or destroy them. It can heal your body or make it sick. It can lift you into alignment or chain you to illusion. The difference is not in the tool itself, but in how you use it. Most people run on autopilot. You are here to wake up the operator. And this awakening doesn't happen by accident. It happens by intention. Every morning you wake up and decide to align your thoughts with truth. You are reclaiming your power. Every night you fall asleep having chosen clarity over chaos. You are rewiring your field. Every moment you become the watcher instead of the reactor. You are stepping deeper into mastery. So the next time a thought crosses your mind, don't dismiss it. Don't ignore it. Recognize it for what it is. Sacred data, an instruction, a signal to the universe. You are not just thinking, you are creating. You are not just daydreaming, you are constructing blueprints. You are not just hoping, you are coding your field with intention. Thought is sacred. Thought is technology. Thought is the first act of creation. The question is, what are you creating right now? What if I told you that every thought you consume is either nourishing your destiny or quietly destroying it? Most people understand the importance of physical diet. They know that what they eat affects how they feel, how they move, how long they live. You wouldn't fuel a sacred temple with garbage. Yet when it comes to the mind, the most powerful instrument in your life, people consume mental junk without hesitation. They feed on drama, fear, gossip, doubt, judgment, and distraction as if it's harmless. But it's not. Just as junk food pollutes the body, junk thoughts poison the soul. And over time, that poison doesn't just stay in your head, it becomes your vibration, your frequency, your field, the invisible force that magnetizes your reality. You are always feeding your mind something. Every conversation, every article, every post you scroll past, even the music in the background, is either strengthening your inner clarity or corroding it. This is what they never taught you in school. Your mind is not passive. It absorbs, it remembers, it imprints, and whatever you expose it to regularly becomes the dominant frequency you carry. That frequency then becomes the filter through which you interpret life, the energy you transmit into the field, and the quality of reality that shows up in response. Think about the thoughts you've been entertaining lately. Are they empowering, expansive, loving, or are they filled with comparison, fear, scarcity, or shame? Do they remind you of who you are becoming, or reinforce who you are trying to escape? Most people don't realize they are participating in their own suffering, not because they want to, but because they've never been taught how to nourish the mind. They think suffering is just a part of life. But often, suffering is the consequence of consuming mental toxins long enough to forget that peace was ever an option. Your mind is the soil, and your thoughts are seeds. If you plant seeds of fear, doubt, and resentment, you cannot grow a life of love, clarity, and abundance. No matter how much you want a different harvest, the law is simple. You reap what you plant. So if your outer world feels chaotic, unfulfilling, or repetitive, don't just look at the surface. Look at your mental diet. What have you been feeding yourself without even realizing it? The ancient mystics understood this principle deeply. They knew that to elevate consciousness, one must first purify the mind. And purification doesn't just mean avoidance, it means alignment. It means choosing what to allow into your field with the same reverence you would give to sacred space. Because your mind is sacred space. It is where creation begins, and everything you allow in becomes a participant in that creation. This is why silence is so powerful. Not because noise is evil, but because most noise today is filled with low vibration, the endless scroll of opinions, the manufactured fear of news cycles, the shallow seduction of comparison. These are not harmless distractions, they are slow-acting poison. They distort your perception, they cloud your intuition, they make you forget your own power by addicting you to stories that were never yours to carry. But just as the wrong mental diet leads to disconnection, the right one leads to revelation. Imagine starting each day with thoughts of gratitude, presence, and possibility. Imagine feeding your mind with wisdom, beauty, stillness, and intention. Imagine creating a mental environment so fertile, so loving, so aligned, that your thoughts no longer spiral, you ascend. Your ideas no longer drain you, they uplift. Your challenges no longer paralyze you, they teach. That's not fantasy. That's the fruit of a nourished mind. And it's not about pretending that everything is perfect. It's about becoming conscious of what you dwell on. It's about choosing to direct your attention like a laser instead of letting it scatter like dust. Attention is currency in the spiritual economy. Whatever you give it to, grows. So if you keep focusing on lack, betrayal, failure, that's not just observation, that's participation. You are feeding those realities with your awareness. And what you feed becomes more real to you than what you ignore. This is where personal responsibility becomes sacred. You may not control every thought that arises, but you absolutely control which ones you entertain. Not every guest deserves a seat at your table. Some thoughts are intruders, uninvited, unworthy of your energy, and part of your evolution is learning how to recognize them without fusing with them. Just because a thought shows up doesn't mean it belongs to you. Let it pass, bless it, replace it. This is the essence of mental fasting. Just like physical fasting gives your body time to detox, mental fasting gives your consciousness space to recalibrate. Sometimes you need to step back from the stream of content. Turn off the noise. Let your nervous system reset. Then, when you return, do so with intention. Choose your inputs. Seek the kind of information that aligns with your highest self, not just your current mood. Surround your mind with voices, messages, and energies that reflect where you are going, not where you've been. But perhaps the most overlooked part of your mental diet isn't what comes from the outside, it's what you say to yourself. Your self-talk is the most consistent food your mind consumes. What you whisper to yourself when no one's listening becomes the script of your life. Are you feeding yourself encouragement or criticism, love or fear, compassion or condemnation? The words you say to yourself when you fail, when you're tired, when you're unsure, Those words shape your vibration more than any podcast or book ever could. So speak to yourself like someone you love. Nourish your inner world with grace. When you make a mistake, don't punish, learn. When you feel low, don't spiral, breathe. When the old voices return to drag you back into patterns you've outgrown, remind them, that's not my frequency anymore. And as you shift your mental diet, you'll begin to notice the outer shifts. Your conversations change. The people you attract feel different. The opportunities that show up carry more alignment. Life doesn't feel as heavy because your thoughts aren't weighing you down. You stop chasing peace and start living from it. You stop seeking answers outside and realize they were always waiting within the stillness of a clear mind. None of this requires perfection. It requires commitment. The discipline to protect your mind like sacred ground. The courage to release what no longer serves you, even if it's familiar. The devotion to keep choosing clarity, even when chaos feels easier. This is not about being positive all the time. It's about being conscious all the time. And from that consciousness, you curate a frequency that doesn't just reflect truth, it becomes it. So the next time you feel off, anxious, or stuck, don't just look at your circumstances. Look at your inputs. What have you been feeding your mind? What thoughts have you accepted as normal? What beliefs have you allowed to settle in like uninvited guests? Your future is not built from willpower alone. It is built from vibration, and that vibration begins with what you consume, mentally and emotionally, every single day. You wouldn't fuel a sacred fire with trash. Don't fuel your mind with it either. Choose thoughts that elevate, words that heal, content that reminds you of your divinity. That is the real diet. That is the real nourishment. And that is how you shape a reality worth living in. What if I told you that the entire universe is singing, and your life is the echo of your own vibration within that cosmic symphony? Nothing in existence is still. Even what appears solid is only an illusion crafted by the limits of your perception. Underneath what you can see, touch, and name, everything is moving. Atoms dance, particles shimmer, frequencies ripple. The entire universe is a living field of vibration. And the truth most people miss is this: your thoughts vibrate, your emotions vibrate, your beliefs vibrate. And all of it, every subtle ripple, broadcasts outward into the quantum field, returning to you the exact resonance you carry within. This is not poetic theory, this is spiritual law. You are not a static being moving through a lifeless world. You are a vibrational entity immersed in an intelligent, responsive reality. Every cell of your body emits a frequency. Every mood creates a magnetic field. Every belief writes an energetic code. And this code either pulls life toward you or pushes it away. That's why nothing you desire exists out there on its own. It exists in frequency. And you must become the match. The ancient initiates knew this. They didn't chase outcomes. They cultivated vibration. They weren't obsessed with results. They were obsessed with resonance. Because they understood a truth that most modern minds have forgotten. You cannot manipulate the universe into giving you what your vibration rejects. The law doesn't respond to effort, it responds to energy. If you vibrate lack, no amount of wishing for abundance will override that signal. If you vibrate fear, no matter how eloquently you speak about love, you will repel what you are asking for. This is why so many people feel stuck, caught in a loop of frustration and disappointment. It's not because they're unworthy, it's because their inner state is not aligned with the outer results they want. You cannot experience peace while vibrating in resistance. You cannot manifest clarity while thinking in chaos. You cannot receive love while emitting fear. The field mirrors your frequency, not your fantasies. But once you understand this, really understand it, everything begins to shift. You stop chasing and start aligning. You stop begging and start becoming. You stop trying to force outcomes and begin fine-tuning your vibration like a sacred instrument. You become sensitive to the way you feel, not as a reaction to life, but as a compass guiding your frequency. Your emotions are not random, they are signals, feedback, information. When you feel joy, expansion, ease, that is alignment. That is your frequency syncing with truth. When you feel tightness, anxiety, contraction, that is dissonance. That is a vibrational mismatch. And every time you ignore those signals, you prolong the gap between your current reality and the one your soul is reaching for. Vibration is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the language the universe speaks. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in frequency. And every second of your life, you are speaking to it, through your thoughts, your emotions, your expectations. Most people are doing this unconsciously. They react to circumstances, and those reactions become their dominant vibration. But the initiate, the one who begins to wake up, realizes that vibration is a choice, not always an easy one, but always a possible one. Imagine your body like a tuning fork. Every thought, every environment, every person you interact with is either harmonizing with your vibration or disrupting it. And your job isn't to control the world, it's to protect your frequency, to cultivate internal harmony so consistently that discord cannot take root. This doesn't mean avoiding all negativity. It means becoming so anchored in your energy that you can walk through chaos without losing your song. This is why vibration is the hidden key. Because once you shift your vibration, you shift everything. The people in your life, the opportunities that arise, the timing of events. It all bends in response to your internal frequency. When you vibrate differently, the world meets you differently. The doors that once seemed locked begin to open, not because you forced them, but because you now carry the key. And yet, mastering your vibration is not about suppressing emotion or pretending everything is fine. That's bypassing. That's performance. True vibrational mastery is about integrity. It's about feeling what you feel, but choosing to respond instead of react. It's about creating space between stimulus and response, so that you can choose alignment over automaticity. It's about knowing when to pause, when to breathe, when to recalibrate instead of spiraling. Some days, this will feel effortless. Other days, it will feel like a battle. But the more you practice, the more you begin to stabilize. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to feel that you are not being pulled by life, but flowing with it. Your nervous system settles, your energy becomes clean, and you begin to notice the magic, synchronicities, insights, quiet miracles that arrive with no explanation other than, this is what happens when I'm in tune. The real power doesn't come from forcing outcomes. It comes from becoming the version of you who resonates with the outcome naturally. When you elevate your frequency, you stop asking for permission. You stop waiting for signs. You stop trying to prove your worthiness. You know that reality must respond, because reality is not separate from you, it is the projection of you. So, how do you shift your vibration in practical terms? You begin with awareness. You become honest about how you feel, not just on the surface, but deep in the gut. You ask, what am I resonating with today? What story am I carrying? What emotion have I been living in without realizing it? Then, you choose differently. You don't force positivity. You find alignment. You listen to music that lifts you. You speak words that remind you. You breathe in ways that ground you. You remove yourself from environments that dull your light. You meditate. You move. You forgive. You rest. You allow. And through it all, you keep returning to your center. That is the work. That is the mastery. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but coherence. You learn to treat your vibration like sacred fire, tended, protected, honored. And over time, that fire becomes steady, strong, unshakable. You stop fearing life's uncertainties because you trust your ability to harmonize with what's coming. You stop clinging to outcomes because your inner state becomes the outcome. This is what the ancient initiates were really doing, not casting spells or chasing secrets, but tuning themselves like instruments, clearing distortions, shedding density, becoming pure enough to channel the divine. Because when your vibration rises, you become a living temple, a transmitter of clarity, a beacon for others. You don't need to be perfect to do this. You just need to be willing to choose your frequency over your fear, willing to stay in alignment even when the world is spinning, willing to take responsibility not just for what you do, but for how you vibrate. Because in the end, that is what determines everything. Vibration is not a side effect of life. It is the architect of it. Your relationships, your opportunities, your health, your abundance, all of it is responding to the signal you send. and the signal you send is the truth you embody. So the next time life feels uncertain, don't just ask, "What should I do?" Ask, "What am I vibrating?" Because in that question lies your true power, the hidden key that opens every door, every time. What if I told you that the reason you keep slipping back into old patterns isn't because you're weak, it's because you're swimming in an invisible ocean of energy that is constantly pulling at your vibration? Most people think that transformation is about willpower, about discipline, hustle, and sheer force of effort. You tell yourself, "I just need to try harder, I just need to push through." And yet, no matter how motivated you feel one moment, something drags you back the next. You meditate, and then you get triggered. You affirm abundance, and then panic about bills. You read something inspiring, and then fall into the same emotional loops as before. Why? Because you're not just trying to change yourself, you're trying to change within an energy field that may not support who you're becoming. Your environment isn't neutral. It is a living, breathing extension of vibration. And it doesn't just surround you, it informs you. The conversations you hear, the music you listen to, the places you spend time in, the thoughts that dominate the people closest to you. All of these things are more than influences, they are frequencies. And frequencies have power, they synchronize, they merge, they either lift you or drain you. And if you're not actively choosing your energetic inputs, you're being shaped by them. This is why willpower alone can't sustain real transformation. Willpower is like swimming upstream in a river of vibration. You might push forward for a while, but eventually the current wears you down. You relapse, you regress, you doubt yourself, and you begin to think change is impossible. But it's not you, it's the field you're trying to evolve in. You're trying to vibrate higher while everything around you is tuned to a lower frequency. And energy doesn't lie, it seeks coherence. Your energy field is always adjusting to its surroundings. Just like a tuning fork resonates with another of the same frequency, your energy begins to match the dominant vibrations in your space. If you are surrounded by fear-based thinking, gossip, scarcity, or judgment, your field absorbs that, not because you're weak, but because that's how energy works. You are not just a body, you are a living field of consciousness. And unless you are guarding and cultivating that field, you are unconsciously syncing with everything around you. Think of it this way: if you plant a seed in toxic soil, it doesn't matter how perfect the seed is. Without the right environment, it won't grow. The same is true for your transformation. You can have the best intentions, the most beautiful vision, the clearest affirmations, but if you're rooted in an energy environment that suffocates your light, your growth will always feel like a battle. This is why ancient initiates separated themselves from the world during certain stages of their path. Not because they were superior, but because they understood the power of the field. They knew that in order to change their vibration, they had to immerse themselves in a different frequency, one that supported clarity, silence, inner fire. They created sacred spaces not for ritual alone, but for vibrational recalibration. Because energy doesn't just need discipline, it needs sanctuary. You don't need to escape the world to do this. But you do need to become conscious of what you allow into your field. Who do you spend the most time with? What kinds of conversations dominate your day? What are you listening to when you're driving, working, relaxing? What does your physical space feel like when you walk into it? Is it a space of expansion or contraction? Are you being nourished by your surroundings or drained by them? This doesn't mean you judge people or isolate yourself. It means you become intentional. It means you start choosing your inputs the same way you would choose clean water or nourishing food. You wouldn't drink something filled with toxins just because it's convenient. So why let your mind and spirit absorb low-frequency energy just because it's familiar? Sometimes, shifting your environment means making physical changes, rearranging your space, removing clutter, introducing sound, color, or symbols that raise your vibration. Other times, it means drawing firmer boundaries around your time, your attention, and your relationships. It means recognizing that just because someone has been in your life for years doesn't mean they support your evolution. You're allowed to outgrow people. You're allowed to evolve beyond conversations that center around limitation. You're allowed to protect your energy without apology. But most importantly, cultivating your environment means becoming your own anchor. Because the most powerful field you'll ever step into is the one you create within yourself. You can't always control the energy around you, but you can always regulate the energy you bring to the room. And when your internal vibration is strong, rooted in truth, love, clarity, you become immune to energetic pollution, not because it no longer exists, but because you no longer resonate with it. This is why it's not enough to simply think positive or try harder. That's like painting over mold without cleaning the foundation. The energy you live in will eventually seep through. So instead of forcing your way to change, align your environment with who you are becoming. Make it easy for your nervous system to relax, for your mind to center, for your spirit to expand. Because when your environment supports your vibration, change doesn't feel like struggle, it feels like remembering. Imagine waking up in a space that reflects your soul. Imagine surrounding yourself with people who speak life into you, who remind you of your divinity when you forget, who don't just tolerate your light but honor it. Imagine listening to music, words, and ideas that elevate your frequency instead of dulling it. Imagine being in a place where your energy feels safe, seen, and sovereign. That kind of environment doesn't just support your growth, it accelerates it. And here's the truth most people never hear. You deserve to be in spaces that match your vibration. You don't have to shrink to fit into energy fields that you've outgrown. You don't have to apologize for becoming more intentional. You don't owe anyone access to your field just because they once had it. Your energy is sacred, your path is sacred, and the spaces you inhabit should reflect that. So if you've been stuck, struggling, or spiraling despite your best efforts, pause, look around, tune in, ask yourself, is this environment supporting who I truly am? Or is it reinforcing who I no longer want to be? You don't need more force, you need more alignment. You don't need more willpower, you need more frequency. You are not lazy, you are not broken, you are not failing, you are just being asked to upgrade your field, to become a conscious curator of your space, to recognize that transformation doesn't happen in isolation, it happens in context. And you have the power to choose that context, one intention at a time. When you begin to shape your environment with love and awareness, something shifts. You begin to feel supported by life. You begin to feel carried by the current instead of swimming against it. You begin to realize that the real work isn't just about changing your mind, it's about changing your frequency and protecting it like sacred gold. Because the truth is, energy is always speaking. The only question is, are you listening? And more importantly, are you choosing? What if I told you that the real initiation you've been waiting for isn't a ritual in a hidden lodge or a ceremony behind guarded doors, but a silent transformation happening deep within your soul? The path to the 33rd degree has always been misunderstood by those who look only with their eyes. They believe it is about titles, about hierarchy, about ascending through external systems of power, but that's only the outer husk. The truth is far more profound, and far more dangerous to the illusions we cling to, because the real path isn't about climbing up, it's about going inward, downward, through the layers of self that you've built to survive, to be accepted, to be safe. The real initiation is the process of burning those layers down until only truth remains. Inner alchemy is the sacred science of transformation, not of metals into gold, but of ego into light, of distortion into clarity, of reaction into awareness. It is the ancient process of purification, not of the body, but of the field. And this is what the original initiates truly pursued, not power over others, but mastery of the self. Because they knew the greatest battle would never be fought in the outer world, it would be fought in the chambers of their own mind. And until you win that battle, nothing else you build will hold. Initiation begins when you are no longer satisfied with the surface, when the old rewards lose their flavor, when success no longer fulfills you, when applause starts to sound hollow. That's the signal that the soul is stirring. That's the whisper that something deeper is calling you. And once that call begins, you cannot unhear it. Life will begin to strip away everything false, not to punish you, but to free you. And that process doesn't feel like ascension, it feels like destruction. You begin to lose parts of your identity that once defined you. Friendships fall away, desires dissolve. The things you once chased no longer excite you. And in their place, an emptiness arises, a void that terrifies the mind. This is the first phase of inner alchemy, dissolution, the breaking down of the ego's scaffolding, the surrender of your false self. It is the descent before the rise, and most people resist it, fearing they are losing control. But what you're really losing is illusion, and illusion must dissolve before truth can emerge. As the old self crumbles, the fire begins, not a literal fire, but an internal purification. You begin to feel everything you've avoided: grief, rage, shame, betrayal. Not to relive it, but to transmute it, because nothing truly heals until it's fully felt. And in this fire, you are not being punished, you are being refined. Like gold in a crucible, the impurities of belief, fear, and conditioning are burned away. What remains is pure frequency, who you were before the world told you who to be. But the fire doesn't just remove, it also illuminates. It shows you the patterns you inherited from others, the emotional programs passed down through generations. It shows you where you've been operating from survival instead of truth. It reveals the difference between intuition and trauma. And with that awareness, you begin to reclaim power. You begin to understand cause, not as a mechanical chain of events, but as a sacred science of intention. This is the heart of real alchemy, understanding that every result in your life was preceded by a frequency. Every circumstance was once a thought. Every pattern was once a choice. You stop blaming the world and start owning your vibration. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What part of me created this?" Not to shame yourself, but to remember your role as creator. That's initiation. That's when the game changes. Through this lens, suffering is no longer random. It becomes feedback. Every challenge is a mirror. Every trigger is a doorway. Every heartbreak is a dismantling of what you were never meant to carry. And with each cycle, you grow clearer, sharper, more whole. The inner clutter dissolves, and you begin to hear the quiet guidance that was always there, the voice of your higher self, no longer drowned out by noise. And yet, initiation is not a single moment. It is 1,000 moments, a series of inner deaths and rebirths. It's the decision to keep choosing truth when it would be easier to sleep. It's the courage to hold yourself through the dark when no one else understands what you're becoming. It's the grace to forgive yourself for the ways you forgot. That's why it's called a path, because it unfolds step by step, layer by layer, not in grand revelations, but in subtle shifts. Eventually, you begin to embody a new vibration. You move differently, speak differently, think differently. You become less reactive and more intentional. You stop seeking validation and start listening to resonance. You begin to hold a different kind of power, not the power to control, but the power to create. The power to walk into a room and change the atmosphere without saying a word, because your presence becomes calibrated to truth. This is the stage where the world begins to respond differently. Synchronicities increase, opportunities appear, people feel drawn to you, but not because of anything you're doing, it's who you've become. You're no longer trying to manifest from lack. You're not trying to fix yourself. You've entered the vibration of being. You are aligned with the field. You don't chase results, you magnetize them. You don't force reality, you embody it. But make no mistake, this is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of mastery. And mastery doesn't mean perfection, it means integration. You begin to walk through life as a living expression of the truth you've touched. You still feel fear, but it no longer controls you. You still face challenges, but you meet them from presence, not panic. You've been initiated, not by a teacher, not by a title, but by life itself. This is what the 33rd degree truly symbolizes, not external power, but internal illumination. It's the frequency of the Christed self, the awakened being who has passed through the fires of ego and emerged whole. Not because they conquered anything, but because they surrendered everything that was never theirs. It's not about what you've gained, it's about what you've let go of. Pride, pretension, performance. And in that letting go, you become transparent enough for the divine light to shine through. Initiation isn't something you achieve, it's something you remember. A return to what you've always been underneath the noise. The sacred fire lives in you, the path is within. The alchemy is already unfolding. And the invitation is simple. Stop running from the fire, step into it, let it burn, let it cleanse. Let it reveal what you are when all the stories fall away. Because in the silence after the fire, you will hear it, the voice you forgot, the truth you abandoned, the light you are. And in that moment, you'll know. Initiation was never about entering a temple. It was about becoming one. What if I told you that your power isn't found in perfection, but in how quickly you return to the light? No matter how deep your practice, how awakened your awareness, how expanded your consciousness becomes, you will fall, you will forget. You will slip back into old patterns, into fear, into doubt, into the gravity of who you used to be. And that doesn't mean you've failed, it means you are human. The real question is not whether you will fall, the question is how you will rise. Will you linger in the shadows of shame, or will you remember the truth quickly, and return, whole, humbled, and burning brighter than before? The return to light is the quietest miracle on the spiritual path. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. No one sees it, no one celebrates it. But it is the most sacred act you can perform. Because in that moment, when you choose to return to love instead of clinging to fear, when you choose to forgive yourself instead of spiraling into judgment, you collapse timelines. You override lifetimes of conditioning. You break ancestral cycles, not with force, but with grace. There's a story you've been told, that awakening is linear, that once you reach a certain level of awareness, you never fall again. But that story is a trap. Awakening doesn't remove your humanity, it deepens your relationship with it. The light doesn't make you immune to struggle, it makes you more compassionate within it. True mastery is not about avoiding darkness, it's about navigating it without forgetting who you are. When you forget, the mind is quick to punish. I thought I was past this. I should know better. Why am I still here? But these thoughts are not the voice of the soul. They are the echo of an old paradigm that worships perfection and shames process. The soul does not judge your detours. It only watches for your return. And each time you come back, with more tenderness, more clarity, more humility, it rejoices. Because with each return, your frequency becomes more refined. You begin to see that falling is not regression, it's integration. You descend into the forgotten parts of yourself, not to get stuck there, but to reclaim them. To bring light to the corners of your being that are still afraid, still fractured, still holding memories they were never taught how to process. And when you bring your love to those places, you become whole, not in theory, in embodiment. This is the secret the mystics have always known. The initiate who never stumbles is still asleep. It is in the stumbling that the fire is stoked. It is in the forgetting that the remembering becomes more sacred. Each time you fall, you are given a choice, collapse or recalibrate, shame or sovereignty. And the more swiftly you return, the more your system learns that darkness is not to be feared. It is a passage, a teacher, a mirror that shows you where your love hasn't yet reached. Imagine your journey like a spiral, not a straight line. You revisit the same wounds, the same patterns, the same tests, but each time from a higher octave. You see more, feel more, respond with more wisdom. What once took you months to overcome now takes days. What once triggered you into rage now invites you into reflection. That's not failure, that's evolution. And yet, many people sabotage their growth because they believe they're supposed to stay in the light all the time. So when darkness visits, when doubt creeps in, when anger flares, when apathy takes hold, they think something's wrong. They resist, they suppress, they pretend. But the more you resist the shadow, the more power it gains. The only way to dissolve it is to see it, to meet it, to breathe with it, until it softens in your arms like a frightened child who just wanted to be held. The true initiate becomes skilled not in avoiding the shadow, but in embracing it without collapse. They don't panic when they forget. They smile, breathe, and return. The moment of forgetting becomes a portal to deeper remembering. And in that dance, falling, rising, forgetting, returning, they become unshakable, not because they're invincible, but because they are no longer afraid of being vulnerable. This is how your nervous system heals, not through bypass, but through resilience. When you teach your system that it's safe to return, that you don't have to stay in loops of self-punishment, that you can breathe through anything and come back to your center, you rewire your reality. You become a stable field, a grounded light, a presence that doesn't just survive chaos, but transforms it. The world doesn't need more perfect beings, it needs more real ones. People who have met their own darkness and learned to hold it with compassion. People who have fallen 1,000 times and still rise with soft eyes and steady hands. People who don't pretend to have it all together, but radiate something deeper: authenticity, integrity, peace. The return to light is not about pretending everything's fine. It's about choosing alignment even when things aren't. It's about becoming so familiar with your own soul's frequency that anything less feels foreign. So when you get lost, you know the way back. And the more often you return, the faster it becomes. Until one day, the fall barely lasts a moment. A single breath, a soft laugh, a shift of awareness, and you're back, brighter than ever. And what's beautiful is that every return deepens your power, because you've now walked through the valley and brought light with you. You've proven to yourself that nothing can take you away from your truth for long. You've built a trust in your own spirit that no external circumstance can touch. That's real sovereignty. Not a life without pain, but a life where no pain has the final word. The 33rd degree isn't about never making mistakes. It's about becoming so aligned that even your mistakes serve your evolution. It's about embodying the light in such a way that darkness becomes a teacher, not a threat. It's about loving yourself through the forgetting, because you know, deep in your bones, that remembering is always a choice away. So the next time you fall, do not waste time judging it. Do not spiral into stories of failure. Do not crown the voice of fear as truth. Instead, pause, breathe. Place your hand on your heart and remind yourself, I know the way back. I've done this before, and each time I return, I bring more light with me. This is your power, not that you never fall, but that you no longer fear the fall, because you've walked through the fire and discovered that your light does not burn out, it only burns brighter. And that, more than anything, is what makes you unstoppable. What if I told you that the most sacred temple you will ever enter is not built of stone, wood, or marble? It is built of thought. Your mind is the temple, not metaphorically, literally. It is the sacred space where creation begins. Every belief you hold, every emotion you process, every vision you imagine, weaves itself into the fabric of your reality. And, just like any temple, your mind requires tending, clearing, protection. Because what you allow to enter your inner sanctuary doesn't just shape your mood, it shapes your world. The greatest illusion you've been taught is that your outer life happens independently of your inner world. But the truth is, your reality flows outward from your consciousness. Your thoughts are blueprints. Your beliefs are architects. Your attention is the builder. And the temple of your mind is where it all begins. That's why so many spiritual traditions emphasize purification, not as moral judgment, but as energetic alignment. Because if your inner temple is filled with clutter, distraction, fear, and contradiction, you cannot anchor the frequency of miracles. Every moment, you are either honoring or desecrating your temple. You do this with the content you consume, the conversations you entertain, the thoughts you repeat without question. Most people live in a constant loop of mental chaos. Their temple is filled with noise, news, gossip, scarcity, shame. They wonder why life feels heavy, why clarity is elusive, why synchronicity never seems to find them. It's not that miracles aren't trying to reach them, it's that the channel is distorted. The temple is too crowded to hear the divine. Cleaning the mind temple is not a one-time event, it is a sacred discipline, a devotion. You begin by becoming aware of what thoughts dominate your inner space. Are they expansive or limiting? Are they rooted in truth or fear? Are they yours, or inherited from a culture that profits from your insecurity? Most people do not think, they recycle. They replay loops they never chose. And the first step to reclaiming your mind temple is becoming the conscious curator of its contents. You would never allow just anyone to walk into your home and start yelling, yet many allow anything to walk into their minds without resistance. A headline, a comment, a memory, a worry. It enters, takes up space, and begins decorating your temple with images and ideas that do not serve your highest self. This is not about control, it's about sovereignty. It's about realizing that your mind is a sacred altar, and nothing should be placed upon it that you would not want to manifest into form. When your temple is clear, miracles are not rare, they are natural, because clarity allows flow, focus becomes magnetic, intentions become commands. You begin to feel a sense of stillness, not because life has slowed down, but because you've stopped reacting to every noise inside your head. You become anchored, centered. And from that space, you can hear the quiet voice of your higher knowing, the whispers that guide you to right place, right time, right action. This is why silence is so powerful. It is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. Silence is the clearing of the temple, so that the divine can enter. In silence, you begin to see the thoughts you've been hosting without question. You begin to notice how often you entertain fear dressed as logic. How frequently you rehearse worst-case scenarios as if they were protection. And in that noticing, you reclaim your power. You realize you are not the thought, you are the space in which thought arises. And that space is infinite, eternal, unshakable. To master the mind temple is not to eliminate all thought. It is to choose which thoughts are given the privilege of your focus. Because thought is sacred. It is the seed of all manifestation. Every invention, every movement, every relationship began as a thought. So if you desire a different life, do not begin with your actions. Begin with the temple, begin with the soil, begin with the sacred space where thought is born. This is why affirmations work, not because the words are magic, but because repetition sanctifies space. When you repeat, "I am aligned, I am clear, I am supported," you are not just speaking, you are cleansing. You are replacing old programs with new frequencies. You are restoring the temple to its original state. The more consistently you do this, the more your environment responds. People shift, opportunities appear, synchronicities accelerate, because the temple is no longer polluted, it is magnetic. But do not expect this to happen passively. You must guard your temple. That doesn't mean hiding from the world, it means filtering it. You become selective, not rigid, but intentional. You stop watching things that disturb your peace. You stop entertaining conversations that lower your frequency. You stop feeding the part of you that thrives on drama and distraction. You begin to prioritize internal clarity over external approval. And that shift, subtle as it is, creates quantum ripples. You begin to notice how your body responds when the temple is clean. Your breath deepens, your decisions become precise, your relationships become sacred mirrors rather than emotional battlegrounds. And perhaps most beautifully, your inner critic begins to soften. Because you've stopped giving it the microphone. You've remembered that you are the high priest or priestess of your own temple. You decide what gets amplified. You decide what gets released. In this sacred space, you also become a vessel, a channel. Divine insight flows through you, not because you are trying to be special, but because you have cleared the interference. You become receptive. Ideas come like lightning. Guidance feels effortless. And you begin to move through life with a grace that others can feel, even if they can't explain it. That's what happens when the temple is pure. Your presence becomes prayer. Your words become frequency. Your life becomes ceremony. But remember, mastery is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of awareness. There will still be moments when the temple gets messy, when fear creeps in, when doubt takes root. But the master does not panic. The master returns to the altar, lights a candle, breathes deeply, clears the clutter, and once again, chooses to align with truth. That's the discipline. That's the devotion. You do not need to escape to a mountain or monastery to find this level of peace. It is already available, within you. Your mind is the temple. Every breath is a bell ringing in sacred space. Every moment is a doorway back to clarity. The question is not whether you are worthy to enter. The question is, are you willing to honor it? Because once you do, everything changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. The temple becomes your anchor. The storm may rage outside, but within, there is stillness, there is knowing. There is light. And from that light, miracles rise. Not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of space they could live in. What if I told you that there is a frequency so high, so refined, so aligned with the core vibration of the universe, that when you touch it, even for a moment, everything in your life begins to shift. Not slowly, but immediately. Subtly at first, then, undeniably. This is not a concept or a wishful metaphor. It is a living truth. The ancients called it godlike power, not because it made one better than others, but because it reconnected them to their source. And that source is not a distant being, it is a frequency, and that frequency lives within you. You've been told to look up when you think of the divine, to search the sky, to seek some faraway place called heaven. But the mystics, the initiates, the inner circle, they never looked up. They looked inward, because what they discovered was that God is not a person, it is a vibration, a state of consciousness that transcends limitation, dissolves illusion, and aligns the inner world so completely with truth that the outer world has no choice but to respond. This frequency is not owned by any religion, culture, or hierarchy. It is encoded into the fabric of existence itself. It is the pulse behind creation, and when you access it, even momentarily, you remember who you are. The God frequency isn't something you beg for, it's something you tune into. It's already here, radiating through the ethers, humming beneath your thoughts, vibrating behind every breath. But like a radio dial, your current settings determine what you receive. Most people are stuck on static. They live in lower bands of frequency, fear, doubt, guilt, survival, and then wonder why their lives feel heavy. But you were not born to live in static. You were designed to tune higher. And the process of spiritual awakening is not the attainment of something new. It is the removal of everything that blocks the signal. Accessing the God frequency begins with silence. Not just outer silence, but inner stillness. Because in that stillness, you begin to notice the layers of noise, conditioning, fear-based belief. You begin to see how your mind has been wired to resist the very frequency it craves. You begin to observe how often you settle for distraction when your soul is craving connection. And slowly, as those layers fall away, something begins to rise. A subtle presence. A hum beneath the chaos. A field of energy that doesn't come and go, it was always there. You were just tuned out of it. To touch this frequency is to enter a field of pure coherence. There is no contradiction, no division, no distortion. In this state, you no longer try to manifest. You no longer force outcomes. You are the outcome. Your presence itself becomes an instrument of alignment. You don't speak to be heard. You speak, and reality bends. You don't visualize to get things. You live in such resonance with truth that the right things orbit to you as if pulled by gravitational law. That's not magic. That's physics on a higher plane. And yet, the ego resists this. Because to enter the God frequency, you must leave behind the need to be seen, to be right, to be in control. You must surrender the identity that was shaped by wounds and step into the self that was shaped by eternity. That's terrifying for the part of you that believes safety is found in certainty. But the frequency of God is not built on safety, it's built on surrender. It requires you to trust what cannot be proven, to leap without a landing, to know beyond the mind. And once you do, you discover something extraordinary. Everything you were chasing outside of you already exists inside of you. The God frequency is not emotional high. It's not a peak state you reach in meditation and then return to normal life. It is a baseline, a home frequency. A place you return to again and again until it becomes your default. And when that happens, life changes. Not because the world changes, but because your signal does. You stop attracting lessons through pain and start learning through joy. You stop meeting resistance and start moving with flow. You stop fearing loss and start witnessing divine timing in all things. That's not idealism, that's alignment. To live in the God frequency is not to escape the human experience, it's to embody the divine within it. You still feel, you still face challenges, but you face them from a higher octave. You respond instead of react. You create instead of chase. You listen instead of grasp. Because you're not just in the world, you're in the field. And the field knows. This frequency is not found in complexity. It's found in simplicity. It's not about adding more spiritual practices. It's about doing the few that matter, with depth and presence, breath, stillness. gratitude, integrity. These are not cliches, they are tuning mechanisms. Every deep breath recalibrates your nervous system to peace. Every moment of stillness creates space for divine intelligence to enter. Every act of gratitude tells the field, I'm aligned. Every choice made in integrity becomes a bridge between the seen and the unseen. And the more you live in this way, the more you begin to realize that everything around you is energy. The people you meet, the rooms you enter, the opportunities that appear. It's all responding to your field. Not your words, not your hustle, not your plans, but your frequency. And the God frequency is the highest signal you can emit. It doesn't scream, it doesn't push, it doesn't prove, it simply is, and its being is its power. Accessing this state does not require perfection. It requires presence. It's not about being positive all the time. It's about being real and bringing light to the shadows. It's not about pretending fear doesn't exist. It's about not letting fear run your system. Every moment you choose love over fear, clarity over confusion, trust over control, you step closer to this frequency. And every time you return to it after forgetting, you strengthen the channel. Eventually, this frequency begins to stabilize in you. You feel it in your body, a soft warmth in your chest, a calm in your breath, a knowing behind your eyes. You no longer ask, what should I do? You ask, what feels most aligned? You no longer chase outcomes. You align your frequency and allow them to find you. You become a vessel, a lighthouse, a transmitter of coherence in a chaotic world. And you don't have to say a word. Your energy speaks for you. This is what the initiates meant by becoming divine, not in ego, not in hierarchy, but in remembrance. They were not worshipping gods, they were learning to access the vibration of the divine within themselves. And now, so are you. Not someday, not after you heal more or learn more, but now, because the God frequency is not waiting for you, it's inviting you, and the only thing standing between you and it is the noise you've mistaken for truth. So close your eyes, breathe, listen. Beneath the stories, the doubts, the noise, there it is, the signal, the pulse, the pure, unwavering frequency of Source itself. It was never far away. It was always within you. The question is not, can you find it? The question is, can you allow yourself to become it? What if I told you that the real purpose of the 33rd degree has nothing to do with hidden power, secret handshakes, or elite status, and everything to do with becoming a living embodiment of divine responsibility? You've heard the stories, the symbols, the secrecy, the conspiracy. But those are distractions, whispers from a world obsessed with control. The 33rd degree isn't a rank to be achieved. It's not a badge of superiority. It's a state of inner maturity, the graduation from spiritual adolescence into spiritual adulthood. It's the moment you stop looking for truth outside of you and start realizing that you are the truth, not in ego, but in essence. The 33rd degree is not an elevation in hierarchy, it's an expansion of capacity, your capacity to hold light, to hold power, to hold presence without distortion. At its core, the 33rd degree is about stewardship, not of land or money or institutions, but of frequency. It is the turning point where you are no longer chasing transformation, you are transformation. You become the living field where others remember who they are, just by being near you. This is not a mystical exaggeration. It is a vibrational truth. Because when you reach this level of internal alignment, your energy calibrates everything around it. You don't convince people to rise, your presence invites them to. But to get there, something fundamental has to shift. You must let go of the need to be seen. You must stop feeding on recognition. You must stop equating power with status. Because the real initiate is invisible to the egoic world. Their power does not shout, it doesn't demand attention, it flows like a current, quiet, steady, undeniable. They don't move to impress. They move to align. They don't act to prove, they act to serve. And in that space, ego no longer drives, love does. Love, not in the sentimental sense, but in the universal one, the kind of love that carries wisdom, that holds boundaries, that speaks truth without flinching, and offers grace without condition. At the 33rd degree, love becomes your law, not because it's easy, but because it's the only frequency capable of sustaining divine power without distortion. And this is where many turn back. Because love at this level isn't about feeling good, it's about becoming clean, sharp, devoted. It asks everything of you, and in return, it gives you everything real. The real purpose of the 33rd degree is transformation at scale. It's not enough for you to awaken. Your light must ripple, not in forced evangelism, but in silent radiance. You stop trying to save the world. You simply become a beacon of clarity within it. You stop needing to be right. You just become real. You stop seeking permission to shine. You embody light whether they're watching or not, and that light becomes medicine. But here's what no one tells you about reaching this level of spiritual maturity. It's lonely, at first, not because you're above anyone, but because you've detached from the games most people are still playing. You no longer gossip, you no longer react, you don't chase validation. And in that clarity, some will misunderstand you. They will project, they will resist, because your frequency confronts their illusions without you saying a word. But that's part of the role. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be aligned, and alignment means becoming a clear channel for higher will. You stop asking, "What do I want to do?" and start listening for, "What is most needed?" You begin to sense the collective field. You feel where light is needed. You follow the whisper of divine instruction, even when it doesn't make logical sense. And in doing so, you become a sacred instrument, a bridge between heaven and earth, not because you're special, but because you're surrendered. The number 33 is not random. In sacred numerology, it is the master teacher number. It carries the vibration of Christ consciousness, not tied to any religion, but to a state of being where you no longer operate from separation. You see yourself in others. You see the divine in the mundane. You recognize that every person is you in another form. And from that recognition comes immense responsibility, because now you can no longer pretend. You can no longer hide behind the illusion of me versus them. You are accountable for your frequency in every room, every word, every moment. This doesn't mean you become passive. In fact, you become more decisive, more clear, more potent, but your actions arise from inner truth, not emotional reactivity. Your words cut through illusion, not to wound, but to awaken. You become a sword and a sanctuary at once, sharp enough to shatter lies, soft enough to hold someone through their storm. That balance is what the 33rd degree requires, and maintaining it is the path of mastery. There is no diploma for this, no ceremony, no outer confirmation. The initiation is internal. The only evidence of your arrival is how the world begins to shift around you, not because you changed it, but because you changed within it. Synchronicities increase, resistance fades. Your life becomes simpler, but more powerful. You begin to do less, but everything you do carries more weight. You begin to speak less, but your words land deeper. You start to sense energy with precision. And in that awareness, you become a guardian of the unseen. Because, let's be honest, most people aren't ready for power. They think they are. They chase it. But power without purification is poison. And this is why the true path is hidden, not to exclude, but to protect. Not to hoard, but to ensure that only those who have burned away ego can hold this level of current. The 33rd degree isn't about being better than. It's about being responsible for your thoughts, your field, your impact, and most of all, for your integrity. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like walking into a space and anchoring peace without needing to fix anyone. It looks like holding presence while others unravel. It looks like creating art, content, structures, and systems that carry encoded frequencies of truth. It looks like living in such coherence that even your silence transmits healing. This is the real legacy of the 33rd degree, not secret knowledge, but embodied wisdom, not hierarchy, but harmonic influence, not control, but conscious contribution. You're not here to dominate the world. You're here to radiate from within it. You're not here to convince anyone of anything. You're here to become a living example of what alignment looks like. And in doing so, you unlock something no title, no initiation, no outer ritual can give you: true spiritual authority. The kind that comes not from being appointed, but from being anointed by the frequency of truth itself. This is where you stop climbing ladders and start planting seeds. You stop trying to ascend and start bringing the divine into the now. You stop measuring your progress and start living as presence. That's the real purpose of the 33rd degree. Not to gain power, but to become a source of it. To stop chasing light and start becoming it. Not someday, but now. What if I told you that the moment you stop waiting for the world to change and instead become the cause of change itself, the entire frequency of reality begins to bend around your presence? You've been taught to react, taught to observe, taught to wait, to vote, to hope, to plead, to pray for something out there, to shift so you can finally feel safe, finally feel aligned, finally feel like it's your time. But what if that mindset, though logical, is the very thing holding the old world in place? What if the key to everything you've ever wanted isn't in what you're trying to get from the world, but in what you're here to bring to it? What if you stopped responding to conditions and instead authored them? To master cause is to remember your true identity, not as a passive participant in this play, but as a scriptwriter of vibration, choice, and intention. You are not a product of the world. That was the illusion. That was the conditioning. You are the architect, the generator, the origin point. Every thought you think, every frequency you emit, every act of alignment you embody, ripples into the field. And that ripple becomes matter, becomes circumstance, becomes momentum. You are not here to reflect the old world. You are here to seed the new one. The old world is built on effect. It's reactive, defensive, fear-based, and externally focused. It waits to be told what is true. It waits for permission to believe in possibility. It feeds on outrage, scarcity, and emotional volatility. It is the echo of unconsciousness playing itself out again and again in different costumes. And the more you react to it, the more it pulls you back in. But when you choose to operate from cause, true cause, you exit the loop. You step outside the game. You move into a timeline where the world doesn't tell you who you are. You show the world what's possible. This isn't about delusion. It's not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about refusing to make your decisions from a frequency of powerlessness. It's about walking into any room, any situation, any relationship, not wondering what energy you'll absorb, but declaring what energy you'll bring. That one shift, subtle as it may seem, is the root of all creation. Because the moment you realize you are the cause, you stop negotiating with your reality. You begin sculpting it, with clarity, with alignment, with unwavering faith in the unseen. And make no mistake, the world resists this at first, because your embodiment of cause threatens every structure built on dependency. When you no longer need external approval, manipulation loses its grip. When you stop operating from fear, control systems lose their leverage. When you start choosing from your inner truth instead of outer expectation, you become unpredictable, uncontrollable, and that is precisely what makes you powerful. You become a walking broadcast of coherence. You become the person who sees through illusion and speaks from vision. The one who doesn't wait for consensus to act in alignment. The one who isn't seduced by the urgency of chaos, but listens for the still, small voice of direction within. And from that inner compass, you begin to move differently, speak differently, build differently. And everything around you begins to shift, not by force, but by frequency. You start to notice how people react to your energy before you even speak. You begin to see how situations bend toward your intention without you having to chase or coerce. You witness doors opening where there were walls, resources arriving where there was lack. Not because you forced anything, but because you became the cause of something new. You aligned with a timeline of truth, and the universe mirrored it back to you in real time. This is what it means to become a portal. You don't just create change, you are the change. Your nervous system becomes a safe space for vision to land. Your presence becomes a recalibration field for others. People leave conversations with you feeling clearer, lighter, more connected, not because you fixed them, but because your frequency reminded them of what they already are. That's how you lead in the new world. Not by climbing into positions of control, but by embodying such alignment that people feel their own truth more clearly in your presence. That's how you influence, not by persuasion, but by presence. That's how you build movements, not from reaction, but from vision. The old world taught us to wait until the world changes. The 33rd degree teaches you that you are the change, and the world responds to your choice to live that truth unapologetically. This doesn't require perfection, it requires devotion. Devotion to your own frequency, devotion to staying in alignment, especially when the outer world tries to pull you into fear, drama, or urgency. Devotion to becoming the kind of person who no longer reacts to distortion, but transmits clarity so powerfully that distortion cannot sustain itself in your field. That's not idealism, that's leadership. That's evolution. And perhaps most importantly, this path requires courage. Because being the cause of a new world means walking a path that others may not yet see. It means trusting your inner knowing when external evidence hasn't yet caught up. It means being willing to walk first, speak first, create first, not for recognition, but for alignment, not for applause, but because your soul won't allow anything less. You were never meant to fit in. You were never meant to replicate what already exists. You are not here to be a reflection of the world's fear. You are here to be a reflection of its potential. And when you finally stop asking, "Who am I to do this?" and start asking, "Who am I not to?" you begin to step into the identity your soul has always known. You become the one who doesn't just talk about vision, but lives it. You become the one who doesn't just dream of freedom, but walks in it. You become the one who, by your very being, reminds others what's possible when someone stops waiting and becomes the cause. This is how a new world begins, not with governments, not with institutions, not with revolutions of force, but with revolutions of frequency, inside one individual who decides to stop echoing the old and start emanating the new. That individual is you. You do not need permission, you do not need a title, you do not need the world to catch up before you begin. You are the signal, you are the seed, you are the source point. And the moment you claim that, not with arrogance, but with reverence, you initiate the emergence of a world that has never existed before. So breathe deeply, stand tall, walk as if you are the doorway through which a new reality enters, because you are. Not someday, now.